Hey guys, welcome. Today is all about hotels and honeymoons 101. How to have a honeymoon. First, you need a partner. That would help. And then how to make your honeymoon better. Obviously, we have a bias towards hotels here. We're going to talk about the hotel experience with your honeymoon. I did my honeymoon in 2018, flew 27,660 miles in just under 60 days with 8 countries and about 55 nights in hotels. I don't expect most people to have such a crazy honeymoon, but I did quite a long one. We booked some. Jamie, what's your situation with honeymoons like?
Mine was much longer ago and not as exciting. So I got married back in 2005 and we did a 7 night Caribbean cruise for our honeymoon. Since then, though, we try to go on milestone anniversary trips, which I would call like mini honeymoons. So 5 year, 10 year, 15 year, and then we got 20 year coming up next year. So we planned some pretty cool trips along the way. I really enjoy planning honeymoons and big anniversary trips. I feel like that's a time that you can kind of throw caution to the wind a little bit, blow your budget out of the water and have a little fun.
I agree. And I think we're going to try and touch on some things. I think also you run into situations with like honeymoons and people doing big milestone of, celebrations. They're not booking a lot. They're not as familiar with some ins and outs of things. So I think that's what we kind of made this to be, cover. I think my first point of contention with hotels and honeymoons is most of your budget needs to go to a hotel. I think there's a lot of situations and a lot of scenarios where, you could make an argument for flights and all these other different things you're doing. But like, I think a honeymoon is especially the time where you're probably going to spend the most time in your room, the most time on property. My first point of contention here, my first honeymoon 101 is fly economy and stay in a nicer suite at a hotel. Like I flew business on some of my honeymoon and I can't remember it at all. But what I do remember is our bungalow at the Park Hyatt Maldives and some of the other really cool hotel experiences I'd probably never do again. I think that's just a good, baseline first thing. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, even in general, that's kind of my advice usually. I'm like, hey, I can suffer for X number of hours on a plane to then have hundreds of hours in a luxury suite, right? Even if you are flying business class, yeah, sure, it's great to lay back a little bit, but you're still in a tin can flying through the sky. So you're going to spend a lot more time in your room or suite or things like that. So yeah, that's where I would allocate my budget, and that is where I typically do allocate my budget on trips.
What are some things that you would say as a travel advisor that you would look at people booking their honeymoon? Are you helping them consider things like weather, season, like what kind of things people maybe aren't thinking about when they're picking their location?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big thing that comes up a lot. I book a lot of Caribbean and, it's couple common misconceptions with the Caribbean. One, it's warm all the time. You get Northern Caribbean, some of the Bahamas, things like that, December, January, February, the water can be a little chilly. So that's one thing to consider. Hurricane comes up a lot. That's not one I don't worry too much about that. The chance of like a big hurricane or something hitting is super rare. And that's what travel insurance and cancellation policies and things like that are for. So something to consider, but not necessarily a reason to avoid. But yeah, I definitely think, that's one of the questions when people want to take a honeymoon, like what kind of trip are you looking for? Some people want, hey, I want to lay on the beach. I want a plunge pool. I want this or that. Other people want to go to a city, right? So really looking for what they want and what they're hoping to get out of the trip is a big one.
Interestingly, I pulled up some information on the Knot, which we're just going to assume is the authority of honeymoons, weddings, and all of that. They did a real wedding study, and they said that 27%, so over 1 in 4 couples, is doing their honeymoon in either Mexico or the Caribbean. What do you say would be your top destinations or top areas that you would pick in that range of places?
That's a good question. So one that we're actually going to hit on today, I'm not going to call it out, but when we do our bookings, one of them is going to be in the Caribbean. I'm a big fan of the Caribbean. Some other really good ones outside of the one that I am going to hit on, I would say some of the smaller islands that are not as popular. So like in Anguilla, trying to think where else I would maybe say. I mean, Aruba's popular, but I think Aruba's a nice one. Yeah, I mean, there's so many good places in the Caribbean you can go to. Bahamas got some really awesome properties, even though it's, that may not sound as exciting. And you can go over into Mexico and Costa Rica. So there's tons of really nice properties in Los Cabos. If you're looking for an all-inclusive, Playa del Carmen is going to have really nice, really budget-friendly, all-inclusive options and some really nice just hotel options in general. Same in the Caribbean, right? If you want to do an all-inclusive, you can do Dominican Republic. There's going to be some really nice options there where your money goes a long way. And then I'm going to hit on one that I think is one of my favorite islands in the Caribbean as we go through booking our $15,000 honeymoon.
Sure. And I think importantly, just because 1 in 4 people go there, that may appeal to you, that may not appeal to you. I think the biggest tip for me, if I'm picking a honeymoon location for someone, is what's something you guys both like doing, especially maybe as a couple, and building something around where you can do that. Like if you guys just, want to only go snorkeling with whale sharks, Mexico and the Caribbean's not doing you much help, but like, let's put you together a trip and send you to Oman, right? If you want to be hiking, some places work better than others. But to me, I think honeymoon's a great, unique place where you can actually do something together, right? Whether you guys are adventurous, you guys just want to lay on the beach, but like, I think figuring that structure out of what you want to do will really help guide your pick, obviously, as well. What do you have, Jamie, for budgets on honeymoons? You put some stuff together on that?
Yeah, so according to the Knot, average honeymoon was $5,700 in 2023. And that's saying with the average wedding cost of $35,000 in 2023 as well. So, I mean, if it's me, I'm going to say, let's, now that I've been married for 20 years, you could skip the wedding and just blow it all on a honeymoon. But yeah, I mean, $5,700, that's a pretty decent budget. You could do some nice stuff with that. Obviously, we're going to talk about a little bit more of a luxury experience. It's a little bit above that, but you could definitely do something nice with $5,700, which is the average honeymoon cost last year. And this is interesting, the breakdown of it. It basically breaks down your honeymoon costs into 4 segments, and it's almost 25% each. So travel, accommodations, activities and experiences, and food and drink, they're all within a couple percent of that, right? So, if your budget's $10,000, this is saying a quarter of that goes to each. And I don't necessarily agree with that. Like we talked about, I would go less on the flights and things like that and more on the accommodations.
Perfect.
I think one other interesting thing you touched on before was talking about how, I don't remember what percent, but was it 72%, 70% leave within 1 or 2 days of their wedding?
Yeah, the Knot says 72% of honeymoons start the day after a wedding.
And that's interesting, right? I mean, I don't know about you. We did the same. We left like the next day to go on our honeymoon. But if you're more flexible, one, that can help stretch your budget. You go at a less popular time, but also, you may be getting married in, whatever, October, and you want to go on a ski trip. It may make sense to push it off till January, February, something like that. So I think that's a mindset to get out of. Maybe you do a mini moon right after your wedding, like a 2-3 day weekend to celebrate it, but then, blow out your big honeymoon around what the ideal time to go to, your location is.
Sure. Yeah, I do think there's a big discrepancy there. I did my honeymoon about 5 months after my wedding, but our honeymoon was also just very long and took a lot of planning at the time from my end. So, we just kind of rolled with everything as it went. One of the big issues you've got too is you also have to remember you're coming off of a lot of people are dealing with wedding planning, then their bachelor parties, right? You've got the big day. I don't necessarily, I'm biased because I obviously did not have my honeymoon the day after, but you are obviously on this incredible high, but I don't really feel like you need to be doing it the day after unless there's just some, I don't know. I mean, obviously for some people, they just want it all in one experience, but I don't think it's the worst idea to not be diving right in, I guess, so to speak.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I really like the idea of doing, a mini moon, right? So like a long weekend and then having your like blowout honeymoon sometime at a later date when it really fits, right? And it may be even a time off thing. Like you're taking time off for your wedding, you're taking time off for your bachelor party, like you said, you're taking time off to do, families in town for wedding, whatever it is. It may be tough to take another week or 2 weeks off right after it. So you space that out a little bit. It may work better. And budget wise, you may have just blown your budget on all these other things.
Sure. It says that the average honeymoon is 7 to 10 days. What do you feel like is an ideal honeymoon in your book?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good honeymoon. I actually read a study somewhere that it was like after, I don't know if it was 7 or 9 days, like you're not getting any more enjoyment and relaxation out of it. Like at that point, like you're fully relaxed and fully like in the moment. I mean, I do feel like 7 to 10 days is a good range in my mind.
At what point, this is another interesting thing. Let's just say our honeymooners are not the most experienced travelers. you're doing something, let's just call it 7 to 10 days. What is the likelihood of, do you feel like it's realistic to be, let's say we're doing the Caribbean. Is it realistic to be like changing islands? Do you think that's worth the complications, or do you just camp out in one place, or do you try and do 2 hotels, 1 island? Like, what do you think your rough guidance would be without details?
Yep. So both of them are, all three are good options, right? So I've done same island, multiple resorts. So I've done 3 resorts on one island before, and that was like a 10-day trip. That was my 15-year anniversary, I believe it was. So we did 3 different resorts on one island, and that was awesome. I have not done it, but I have booked and canceled more than once the plan to do multiple islands in the Caribbean. And for one reason or another, it's not worked out. But depending on the island, it's not bad hopping between them. Actually, I have hopped between islands. I've done multiple Bahamian islands in one trip. And typically the flights are so short. You're up in the air for 30, 40 minutes. It's not a huge undertaking. I probably wouldn't do it if I was on a 6 or 7 day trip, but you get up in that 10, 12 day range, you can lose a half a day to travel and it's not a big deal. But, if you're there for 6 or 7 nights, you may not want to be feeling like you just moved into the hotel, having to check out, check into another one, things like that. So, what about you? I mean, your honeymoon, you bounced around quite a bit, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
But you also
I'm sure,
went for a long time.
yeah, we were gone a long, long time. I'm sure my wife would have liked a few less stops in the end, but I will say we did so many cool things in so many different, places. Like we were in Cambodia for 5 nights, and then we were in the Maldives for a week, and we made our way around the world in progress of our trip. So, I don't know. I mean, there's definitely parts of it that didn't feel very honeymoony, in like a traditional sense, but like there are a lot of things that we did I don't think I would do again, but I'm glad we got done. Like Cambodia was kind of a one and done for me, but it was really cool seeing all the temples and doing all that. Sadly, it was, man, we went in January and it was hotter than,
Wow.
it was so humid and hot there. So I can't even imagine people going in like May or June. But yeah, I mean, I think if you can avoid relocating and moving on a honeymoon, I think that'd be my preference. Now, if you're doing something like, say, you mentioned a ski trip and you want to go ski in the Swiss Alps, you obviously are going to have to fly into somewhere like a Geneva or Zurich, right? And maybe do a home base, like couple nights there, and then go ski for 5 or 6 nights and work your way back home. Like stuff like that's always going to be possible. My one hesitation for the Caribbean would be transferring and traveling through the islands there. It's not the best. Like a lot of the airports suck. If you're going from island to island, a lot of the flight options aren't great. So like, I feel like I'd have a hesitance unless you're a pretty experienced traveler. Like, nothing could kill a honeymoon than 3 hours in the Turks and Caicos airport. My gosh. It's like that island's so pretty and that airport is so rough.
Yeah, I would agree. A lot of the islands have not the best airports. Now, if you are flying like inter-island, a lot of times you're not going to necessarily like the main big airport. So that sometimes is nice, but it's also an interesting experience. Like we flew from Eleuthera, and I can't remember the airport we flew to, but it was just like, hey, once everyone's here, we're taking off. Like it's kind of scheduled, but it's kind of not. So it's good and bad, right? But on the flip side, I could definitely see that turning into like multiple hour delay, or, it's not an American Airlines or Delta where like they're going to be able to figure it out if something goes sideways.
Yeah, and I just think it's one of those things, like if you're an experienced flyer, if who you're booking for travels a lot and can kind of go with the flow, sure. If it's someone who's like, hey, I've never left the country before, and we're leaving for our honeymoon, I don't know how comfortable I'd feel sending them from,
Yep.
Whatever island to whatever island. Like just get them in one place and have them camped out. I will say, if you're going from luxury hotel to luxury hotel, like on a island, let's just say, having the second hotel handle all the transfer and pickup and stuff, that's probably a lot smoother of an experience and something I would consider. I think too, especially for honeymoons, and one of the reasons I say go as luxurious and travel as much as you can is like, don't be afraid to ask for things either from the hotel. Like, I think that's one thing your average traveler doesn't think to do or is like afraid to do, is like a lot of times these hotels can operate to a point at your disposal, right? You're not an experienced traveler. You're going on your honeymoon for your first time and you're like, oh my God, I forgot my curling iron. Let's just say, some of these nicer luxury hotels use messages and say, hey, forgot my curling iron. And, a lot of these concierges will have one in your room when you land.
Yep.
it may be at a cost to you, right? Whatever. It's not like they're just going to give you a free curling iron, but like a lot of those things can be made happen where it's like, especially if you're leaving the day after your wedding, you're probably going to forget some things. You don't want it to ruin your trip. Like, figure it out at the airport, message the hotel, and a lot of that stuff can be handled before you're even landing. I think too, you know, doing some things you might not necessarily want to deal with. I think on your honeymoon is like paying the premium to do car service from the properties and some things like that.
Yeah, I would say particularly, and this is one I typically will say almost anywhere I go, not everywhere, but most places, if it's particularly on a honeymoon, I am going to, at least the initial pickup from the airport, I am going to organize private transfer. So it's one less thing to think about or stress about when you get there, right? A lot of times you're showing up at a new location, you've never flown into this airport, you don't really know your way around. You don't want to walk out and be like, okay, where do I get a cab or how do I get to the place? Like, it's nice, and it's usually not a large expense to have private transfer organized ahead of time, and someone's waiting there with a sign, they grab your bags, they usher you through, you don't have to think about anything. And then, maybe you go to the same place next year, you don't need to do that, but definitely the first time you're going somewhere or on a honeymoon, like just one less thing to worry about and think about.
For sure. And especially, we were talking 1 in 4 people is going to Mexico or the Caribbean, man. Those Mexican airports are wild if you don't have, you're going to be bum rushed by about 670 people between baggage claim and outside.
Yep, I would agree.
So we've covered a few things in here. We're 7 to 10 days, $5,700. Let's just say someone's like, I don't want to do the Caribbean. I don't want to do Mexico. I don't want to be, do what everyone else is doing or being basic or however you want to reference it. They don't have any hobbies, right? So we're not working with a lot here. What are some less common or maybe like, the big thing now I think is like dupes, right? It's like, oh, these are luxury dupes. So like, what is your version of like, what are some alternative places people could look at that maybe they're not thinking of as a honeymoon destination?
Yeah, we talked about a few before, and one that came up that I actually did for spring break last year, and I guess this is, season dependent. I really enjoyed, like, there's some really cool places in Canada that give you like a true like out of country feel, but it's like out of country light. So we did Banff and Lake Louise. Like, that's a really cool spot to go to. And like, you could do that summer or winter. If we don't want to do Mexico, like you've got Europe, there's tons of European options. Where did you just go? You went somewhere that I think would be over the summer that would have been a cool honeymoon option. Was it, you go to Portugal or where'd you go?
Yeah. Yeah. I did 4 weeks in Portugal.
Like, I feel like that's a good one. Like, you don't hear that a lot. We just got back from Greece. Greece was awesome. I could see that being a really great honeymoon destination. What are some other good ones that we were talking about before? One that I have not been to, but it's on my list, and I'm trying to see if it's on here or not as one. I think Croatia would be a really good honeymoon destination and really potentially affordable. And you may be able to even like hook up with like a small private yacht group or something like that. Like, you could do some pretty unique stuff in Croatia, I think. What about you? You had a couple that I think we looked at before, right?
I got a couple. I would say too, I mentioned some of these people, honeymoon, it's your first time traveling, leaving the country. If you're not 100% comfortable leaving the country, part of me almost says, don't even push your luck. Don't even try it on your honeymoon, right? There's a lot of places within the U.S. that I think you can get a pretty unique experience. U.S. Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico are two to consider. Obviously, they're in the Caribbean, but I think not where traditionally people think of going on a vacation in the Caribbean. I'd even consider Hawaii. I mean, especially if it's just going to make you more comfortable being in the United States, like, maybe don't push your luck. You can have some, Hawaii comes at obviously a much higher cost, I think, than Mexico in some of these places, but I think you can have a truly unique and romantic, week and stuff there. One of the other ideas that I had is South Africa. It's far, but South Africa, like Cape Town, is like almost like it's like the cheapest version of Los Angeles in a way. Like, I lived in LA at the time I did Cape Town. It's got a very LA vibe, but everything is like $5 instead of $500. And then you've got the cool thing from Cape Town is you have a wine country really close by. You've got a lot of like penguin and like shark things you can do if you're kind of into animals. And then realistically, what I would personally do is pop up to like Botswana and do an Okavango Delta safari and head home. But there's even like safaris in South Africa you can do, like Kruger National Park, and there's some cheap ones. You can do self-drive safaris in there too if you're just on a tight budget. But South Africa is really far, but once you get there, it's not the most expensive, and it's really pretty, and the weather is pretty good almost year round.
That's a good one.
I think one last one too, I meant to bring up is Japan as a place I think people wouldn't think of as a honeymoon destination. I feel like Japan's getting real almost like played out to this point. But I think two places where I don't see people going a lot, Okinawa, which I would argue is like it's very similar to Hawaii, but there's almost nobody there. Like we did Okinawa on our honeymoon, and it's like, I don't want to say desolate, but it's probably what Hawaii was like in the 90s, right? You could drive a lot. You're not going to see a lot of people. The resorts are not empty, but there's nothing like Waikiki Beach there, right? Like everything feels very private. There's large hotels, but most have their own little cove and access. The snorkeling there is great. The food, especially if you're a big pork fan, they eat a lot more pork than like mainland Japan. Obviously, the seafood is really good. And then I think I haven't been there, but if you go way up north, the skiing up there is supposedly incredible. Flying into Sapporo and doing like Hokkaido and stuff. And there's some great luxury hotels up there now too.
There's some really nice hotels. And I believe, I may be making this up, but I believe that area of Japan gets more snow than anywhere else in the world.
Nice. Yeah, I had a friend I guess we're still friends. I didn't have him. He's still alive. But I hung out with him more, but he went and worked at Honda in Japan, and I stayed with him in Tokyo, and he's like a big snowboarder, and he would go up there every chance. He said it was just incredible. Like it was like the softest and like thickest powder he had ever snowed in.
Yeah, that's definitely on my list to check out at some point.
Yeah. And it, like I said, I think it comes down to like, what's your guys' hobbies? If you guys both like snowboarding, I think that's a great idea. If you guys don't, don't consider it. We kind of neglected South America too. I think there's probably some good countries. Patagonia, if you guys are into hiking or even doing like the Machu Picchu trail. And alternatively, like with Machu Picchu, there's some really high-end stuff you can do there. There's a really nice JW Marriott in Cusco I stayed at. There's Belmond does private trains up through there as well. So if that kind of interests you, there's definitely like some real luxury options. I don't think people consider that as like a super luxurious trip, but you could definitely turn it into one.
Well, that's a good one. I looked at doing that with they've got some really cool river cruises. So you could do Machu Picchu for however many days. And then there's all different lengths of the river cruises from like 3 to 7 days. And they're really nice. Like they're not like, they look very nice. Like I think that would be a cool trip.
Yeah, Machu Picchu and then tack on the Galapagos too would be something else interesting. Get on one of the small private, smaller yachts that go out there and stuff. All right, guys. So I think that covers kind of our honeymoon 101. If you want more information or if we should revisit this topic, send us a message, leave a comment. I'd definitely like to do it again if there's some specific things we could tackle. If you missed the end of our last episode or one of our last episodes, what we talked about was we're going to do a $15,000 vacation. The $15,000 doesn't include flights, doesn't include activities. It was literally just our hotels and accommodations. I planned the much better honeymoon, so I'm going to go first. Had to do specific dates, which you're going to find out why, but let me start running you through my trip. It is a little over budget, like by the skinniest margin. Hopefully Jamie's got
I'm under budget, so we can use my extra budget for yours.
I'm going to borrow some of your budget. Why don't you whip out your calculator if you can, Jamie, and you can track some of my expenses here as we go.
All right.
So we are arriving at Turks and Caicos, hopefully on a private jet because, whatever, there's no budget, right, for that. You are staying at Aman Yara, which is probably one of the most stunning properties I have seen. We're doing 3 nights at Aman Yara, which is the Aman property in Turks and Caicos, racking up after taxes and fees at $5,587, which I gotta say, for an Aman hotel, that is a steal. We're staying there June 16th to 19th, 2025. It's a little over 700 square feet. It is an in-property one, so I'm hoping they're going to be nice to us since we're booking through an agent. I'm going to send them a message and say, hey, these lovely couple on the honeymoon, maybe we can slide into the ocean pavilion, get a little ocean view. I couldn't afford it in my budget, so there was that. For those of you who don't know, Turks and Caicos is a British overseas territory, so I want to keep it a little easy. British Airways has a direct flight to London, and yes, this couple is really into horses, just by the way. This is their backstory. They're really into horses, and I think they're alcoholics, but that part's not relevant. Just the horse part. So we're flying into London after we leave the Amman Turks and Caicos. We're going to the Four Seasons Hampshire, which I stayed at last year. We're doing 2 nights there in a manor room, at 2187.60, 485 square feet. It's the biggest standard room right below the suites. Didn't have a budget to sneak into the suites, but it's okay. We're going to do a lot of horseback riding, some canal rides. They have a huge equestrian center there. There's a lot to do. Some falconry, perhaps, maybe shoot some things. They've got clay shooting and some other things like that.
And
we have
not to cut you off, if someone wants more info, they can probably check out your episode on that property specifically where you hit a lot of that stuff.
Yes, I'll put in the show notes that whole property. I mean, it took us 25 minutes to walk through the activities at this property. So it was a great time, great property, great food. So then I'm going to be taking a private car from the Four Seasons to the Victoria train station in London, and we are hopping on a Belmont British Pullman train to the Royal Ascot horse race.
Is this why we have specific dates?
Yes, on June 21st. Now, I did some research and it looks really hard to get tickets to the Royal Ascot, but we're just going to suspend reality and just, we have tickets. I did splurge here because, we're on a honeymoon. I did not want to be sharing a train car with anyone. So we have a private compartment for two, which comes with some premium booze and whatnot. It is $4,061.17. You leave at 6 a.m. and they drop you back off at 11 p.m. same day. So it's same day train ride. Pretty cool. I'm really into trains, especially Pullman trains. So I thought that was kind of fun. They drop you off at the event right out front. Pretty much you go all day. They take you back, drop you off back in London. Put me in London. There's so many hotel choices in London. I really wanted to get creative and go to Italy or Scotland and wrap this thing up. But I was like, we'll just do a couple nights in London. We won't get too out of pocket here. I decided to go with the Ritz London. Not sure it's the best choice. I was really torn. The Rosewood and some other places look cool. But that for 2 nights in a deluxe room, 380 square feet was $3381.04.
Whew, you're a little over $200.
Yeah, $200 over. So what's my total?
15,216 and some change. $15,216 and some change.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool though. That train sounds awesome.
Yeah, and you got your own train car.
That's pretty cool.
Fancy train. So, it's kind of got everything. You're on the beach on an island for 3 nights. You've got activities and things to do for 2 nights. You got this train car, and then you got 2 nights in the city to eat some Michelin restaurants. I don't know if someone would realistically want to do all that, but it's it kind of gave you a little bit of everything, like laziness at the beach, ton of activities. You're going to a big sporting event, which I feel like that's becoming more and more trendy over time, right? Everyone following the Taylor Swift tour, people, I feel like doing the Olympics. So it just seemed like a cool, especially if you're into horses, that event. And then, 2 days in the city to eat some Michelin restaurants, whatever. And then flying home from London is obviously a piece of cake to pretty much everywhere.
That's a fun honeymoon. I like it.
That was my pitch. All right. What you got, Jamie?
All right. So mine is not going to be as exciting. This is going to be similar to what I actually did personally for my 15-year anniversary. So we are going to be going to St. Lucia. And people that are not familiar with St. Lucia, they are famous for their pitons, which are these really cool, tall mountains that stick up out of the ocean. They almost look like volcanoes. They're really beautiful. And it's a really cool island. It's probably one of my favorite islands in the Caribbean. We are going to be doing a 9-night itinerary. And before I go into the hotels themselves, I'm going to hit on a few things that I think would be fun to do while you're in St. Lucia. I've done a few different ones. So some of the things you can do there, one is obviously just hanging out, snorkeling, and seeing the beautiful pittons in the background. One of the hotels that I'm going to talk about actually has a I don't know if it's a sanctuary, but it's a protected area where you snorkel right from the beach of the hotel. And it is really, really cool. So it's a marine reserve. So right from the hotel, you're between the 2 pittons. You can snorkel there. There's tons of fish and stuff. And you come up. I mean, the views are just amazing. I think a catamaran is a must do. So sunset catamaran. We did a private catamaran around the islands. The views are stunning. Sunset, really cool. Another thing they're known for is their volcanic hot springs. So you can do a tour there and do mud baths where you go in these sulfur springs, you cover yourself in the mud, rinse off. It's a really cool experience. I believe St. Lucia is the only drive-in volcano anywhere in the world. So you can just drive right up to the volcano, and that's where these hot springs are. So that's really cool. And then I'll hit it on a couple other things you can actually do at each one of these properties. I'd probably give them away if I go into it too much. But the first property I'm going to hit on is a Viceroy Hotel and it is Sugar Beach. And this is a really cool one. It's right on the beach. There is tons of villas and private homes and all different, like the accommodations are really amazing here. Anything from a regular hotel room up until, I want to say, like a 6 or 7 bedroom private oceanfront home. For our stay, we are going to do a luxury villa with a private plunge pool. This is similar to the accommodations I stayed in while we were there. So we're going to do 5 nights here, and this is a virtuoso property, so it's going to include breakfast for 2 daily, property credit. Hopefully we can score you an upgrade because it's your honeymoon, and some type of really cool welcome amenity to commemorate this special trip. And we are going to be at $6,600, $6605.05. And this trip is going to be from October 1st through the 6th at Sugar Beach. I really like this property. The beach is probably one of the better ones in the Caribbean. It's situated between the 2 Pitons. It's got the snorkeling there. The property's huge, so they have a really nice fitness center. They've got tons of space to walk around. It's really cool. But their spa is amazing. It's like a treehouse spa. I'll see if I have some pictures that we can share or post, but it is like you walk through, you're in this like really cool wooded treehouse. After you get your massage, you have a private like spring-fed hot tub type thing right outside. So I got my massage. I was able to like jump in this little hot tub thing. It was really, really cool. So that's going to be where we spend our first 5 nights of this trip. We are then going to take a private transfer to what is largely considered one of the top most romantic hotels in the world. It wins awards every single year for this, and it's going to be Jade Mountain. I wanted to do 5 nights here, but the budget would not allow it. So we are going to do 4 nights at Jade Mountain. And 4 nights at Jade Mountain comes in at $75.96. So a little bit under $8,000. And that's with a 4th night free promo going on. So it's definitely, Jade Mountain can bust your budget, but it is worth every penny in my opinion. They joke when you get there, you have a private butler, and they'll talk about people coming and not leaving the room for 5 days, right? So you can do your breakfast, lunch, dinner in room. And it's just such a romantic open air location. We are going to do 4 nights in a star sanctuary. So all their rooms are, 3-wall open air, and they call them sanctuaries. And each one has its own little, if you've never seen this place, it's amazing. It is tons of stone. The guy that built it actually just passed away like a month or 2 ago. So his wife and family are going to continue to run it as is. But this guy designed it, and every single sanctuary has its own bridge that you walk over to get to your room. So that's really cool. They all have their own, not all, but what we're booking has a private plunge pool. The base rooms don't have plunge pools, but if you're going there, it's a couple $100 more. You want to stay in a sanctuary with a plunge pool. You're looking out over the pitons, and it is just amazing. It is one of the coolest rooms I've ever stayed in or seen in my life. The food there is really, really good. They've got a rooftop restaurant we went to every night. The food is amazing. And they have tons of activities and things you can do there. One thing we did was private mountain biking, and they just give you the bikes and let you go. They have tons of trails, and that was really cool. Similar snorkeling. I mean, we went like right off the beach snorkeling there, and that was really neat. They have their own like cocoa plantation there. So you can actually do chocolate making classes and make your own chocolate, which is really cool. And then I would end again with a sunset catamaran sail or something like that special to end the trip. But that was a really cool trip. I would love to go back and check it out. I've got a couple fun facts about it. The guy that actually designed it, his name was Nick Trubetskoy, and they had planned on building another one there, and that just never happened. But it's like such a eco-friendly, like just built into the landscape. It's just a really, really neat spot. But St. Lucia in general, the Pitons, the Gros and Petite Pitons, which are the big ones and the small ones, they're volcanic plugs and a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Oh, that's where I got the fun fact. Drive-in volcano. St. Lucia is home to the world's only drive-in volcano at the Sulphur Springs, which is, that was a really cool experience. They host an annual St. Lucia Jazz Festival, and it has a blend of African, French, and British cultures. So it's a really neat, even the town there is just a really neat vibe. Like we walk around, go into some shops. I really like St. Lucia. They've got beaches, rainforests, waterfalls, really good snorkeling, diving if you're into it. But yeah, this would be my honeymoon choice. Easy to get to from the US. So that's my pitch.
I'm sold. I'm guessing if you had to pick one of the 2 hotels, you'd pick Jade Mountain.
Man, yeah, if you could only do one, Jade Mountain is amazing. The rooms themselves it's not like, there's nothing like it, right? Like you can go to the Maldives and you get these swim out things, but these 3-wall open air suites, just the architecture is really amazing. You've got your own butler and the service was just fantastic. The food was really good. Really enjoyed it. Sugar Beach, if you're more of a beach person, and I will say this, right? So if you're going and you want to lounge on the beach, Sugar Beach would probably be a better choice. Jade Mountain is up on a mountain. So if you want to get to the beach, it's a walk or they can drive you down to the beach, but you're not walking out of your room and going to the beach where Sugar Beach is you can walk out and just go to the beach and hang out there. So if beach is more important, Sugar Beach is probably a better option, but true luxury food, just like honeymoon, anniversary, Jade Mountain's going to be my choice.
Can you get there direct from Charlotte, or like what's the situation there with flight?
So I think we have a once weekly, like Saturday to Saturday flight. So they do have quite a few flights, but it's usually like once or twice a week. So you may end up having to connect in like Miami or something like that to get there. But their airport, I remember actually being pretty nice, if I remember correctly. Flew there during COVID, so it was a little bit of a different experience, but I do remember the airport being pretty nice.
I think my last question, listen, sounds great, but what is the issue with it? So being 3 walls, do you get like a mosquito net, or do they not have a lot of bugs there? Like, what's the situation with all that?
That's a great question. So when we went to St. Lucia, 2 of the 3 properties, so I'll shout out Ladera. Ladera is a really cool property as well. It's a lot like Jade Mountain. It typically prices out a little bit better, but in this case, it was not. So I chose Jade over Ladera in this case, but it's a really cool property. But yeah, so we did not have a bug issue. I imagine maybe sometime a year it could be, but they do mosquito nets over the bed just in case. And then also every evening, the butler comes in and lights like these coil things, 2 or 3 of them around the room that are supposed to keep bugs away. So we didn't have an issue. We went in, I don't know if it was September or October. We didn't have an issue with bugs or temperature. And I do like a really cold or cool room. So that was a big thing that I was very nervous about, being 3 walls, that I was going to be too hot. But the breeze, the fan, I was totally fine. And then if it was warm during the day, you just hop in your private plunge pool.
Perfect. Well, I think those are our 2 $15,000 honeymoons. I think I would take both.
Yeah,
maybe double honeymoon it. All right, really, we could combo
it.
ours. We could start with yours, fly to Turks, and then
I like it.
And then keep going.
I'm going to throw out one more honorable mention that I didn't really think about while we were hitting it. I think Bermuda is a really, particularly for East Coast, is a really cool destination. It has a short season, so think like Memorial Day to Labor Day. But that is a really cool island with some really beautiful beaches. If you don't want to fly 10 or 12 hours or, anything crazy like that. I think Bermuda is a really cool honeymoon choice.
Excellent. I think I gave all mine away already. So we'll land on that. But I think the big lesson here is just do whatever you guys are both into. Just find something you guys both like, or it's like, hey, just because everyone does Mexico and the Caribbean, if you guys love the mountains, go find a nice place like Jade Mountain up in the mountains. Like, just find something that makes sense for you and just execute on that. If you guys love Disney World together, go to Disney World. You know what I mean? Whatever it is, just make it happen. I think make it be a good memory, or, maybe if you guys love Disney, go to one of the overseas Disneys so you're not as tied of a memory. Go to Disney Hong Kong or something. But look, I think that's a wrap. I think that was a pretty good episode, and we got some exciting ones coming the next few weeks. So we will see you next Friday. Bye, guys.
See ya.